My father, before he and my mother emigrated from Germany, my father had been a very junior lecturer in the University of Berlin in the Department of Economics and Politics. This was the subject which then in the late 20s, early 30s of the 20th century was a very hot subject indeed. It attracted all the bright and inquiring students, maybe almost to the extent that nuclear physics was attracting science students in those days. This photograph is of my father, my mother, who is holding or supporting a baby, which is me.
It was decided that all Germans and Austrians in Britain were to appear before a tribunal to be graded A, B, or C. If you were graded A, you were considered high risk and were to be interned at once. If you were graded B, you were considered a possible threat and would have restrictions placed on you, like not being allowed a wireless receiver. If you were graded C, you were considered to be not a threat and would be left at liberty.
I was 8 at the time. I was not really told about the internment. I really had only been told that he was away, and I was told nothing about the actual circumstances or about the internment.
Most people actually welcomed refugees. We were very well treated and generally welcomed. We actually had some distant relatives, cousins, of which the senior member, whom I only met once as a kid, I don't remember him, was Lord Chief Justice, Lord Slessor. So they were quite high up relatives. And my father often talked about how actually they did not welcome us. They were of earlier German Jewish extraction. They'd settled in England, they'd become more English than the English, and I think they resented being reminded of their origin.
Yeah.
He had 2 sisters, and I remember them in Gerrard's Cross before we moved to Jordan's, 1938 and 9, and they were very welcoming, and that was fine at a superficial level. But deeper down, they didn't really want to have to know about these relatives. We just moved from Gerrard's Cross to a house in Jordan's in Buckinghamshire, which is a Quaker village, and it was through friends and friends of friends, whom we later got to know as very close friends, who found us a house to rent. Imagine it was about May of 1940.
Okay.
But I do remember 1 or 2 policemen coming to the door. They were expected. He'd been interviewed before, and they made decisions about who gets interned and when and where, and he was chosen, so he knew he was liable. One morning, 2 policemen came, and said, come with us, and he had a suitcase ready to take with him. And for his trip, I gave him a shilling.
I was, of course, aged 8 at the time, completely unaware of what was going on, and I didn't even know of the existence of these letters until after both my parents had died, by which time I was in my 50s. I think they were permitted to write one letter a week. The letters were censored, so the letters are all very straightforward and not referring to any contentious issues at all. Had they had anything like that, they wouldn't have passed the censor. They had to be written in English because otherwise the censor wouldn't be able to read them. Mostly, if I remember correctly, the letters contained requests to my mother to send things, fairly basic things, like toothpaste, and also some foodstuffs.
My dearest, your parcel arrived on the 19th. Please send 2 parcels per week. Please put in parcel Ryvita, cheese, meat or fish pasties, bacon, sugar, prunes, also warm blanket, scarf, 4 warm socks, Shavex shaving cream, dozen matches in original wrapper, dental cream, stuff to mend lilo bed, fresh fruit, tie, tomatoes and candles. Sorry about this, but very difficult to obtain personal things. Tobacco is forbidden. Life is very monotonous. I'm beginning to read, though my mental concentration still poor. The indescribable worries of most of the people I'm staying with is very disturbing, as I anticipated in London. Unless my job are energetically doing something, release very improbable. Difficult even for old and infirm ones. Whatever you do, you should keep my winter things handy. Did you tell Francesca? No wireless allowed. Weather is wet and cold, bathed only once. Pity because washing not as I am used to doing. Yesterday I cleaned the house with others. Next week I have duties in the kitchen. Send soap for washing. What a sad marriage anniversary. We were so happy. Shall we ever be happy again? Hope to get more news from you soon. Conrad's Feig.
They enjoyed themselves, but that was because what else can you do? You either twiddle your thumbs and worry and get more and more bored, or you do nice things for each other.
I'm terribly worried about the ordeal you are going through, and I'm sitting in the sun reading novels. If only I could be with you. There are lots of lectures, music, cabaret, everything primitive but good and entertaining.
I think there were two sides to this. There was the one side where life was not very comfortable, not a lot to eat, although I think it was sufficient. Nobody starved. Activities were very restricted. You couldn't leave the encampment. It was barbed wired all round. And there was always the worry about one's family, how they were faring in the circumstances of the war, with air raids and the threat of invasion. So there was that side to it. On the other hand, not possibly all camps, I think probably only a few of them, had a lot of people in them who were professional people. A lot of them were university academics. There were musicians, there were artists, all manner of people who had escaped from Nazi-occupied countries. And they all got together and arranged many, many activities, lectures and musical activities and discussion groups and all manner of activities of that sort, which my father, I'm sure, took part in and enjoyed. So there were the two things, but there was always the background worry about the whole situation. When he arrived in Britain, he took on a job which really didn't make use of his academic background to any extent at all, with a big food manufacturing firm which doesn't exist anymore now, but which was very, very central to the whole food and catering industry, J. Lyons and Company. My father worked in an office there in a fairly lowly capacity. When he returned from internment, he went back to his job. The Joe Lyons and Company had kept the job over for him, and he stayed with them for the rest of his working life. I know that while he was interned, he hoped that the management at Joe Lyons and Company would lobby the government for his release, and was very disappointed that they really didn't exert themselves in this way at all very much.
My dearest, this will be a sad birthday for you. I wish I were allowed to send you some flowers from here, so I shall pick them alone on the day. Without the worries, life would be quite tolerable here. These are lovely summer days, and physically I feel fitter than ever. I'm out of doors from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. with only the mealtime breaks. Bathing now every day. The regulations are very depressing, and I'm now very pessimistic as regards of release. This to me is a greater disappointment as any before in our life. I still cannot understand it. Should you also come to the conclusion that release is impossible, then I am afraid being deported to Australia will become a serious possibility for us three. I cannot bear the thought of such hazards, nor can I form any sound judgment, being so terribly cut off from the outside. Please include in parcels boiled eggs, fresh fruit and brown bread. Very difficult to buy here. I'm getting more and more concentration for studies, but not for novels. Most people are doing nothing but getting on each other's nerves. I hope to retain my own mental balance. Goodbye and good luck for us all. Conrad. Were you told much about his being interned as a child?
Yes, that big efforts were being made by my mother, who wrote to all sorts of important people to get him out. The problem being he had been running a printing firm of his own, and that was anyway collapsing financially, but I think that was the final blow for it. I don't know exactly when. But I know that contacts with all sorts of people were made, and there was general discussion about how to get people out. And I knew there were high-ups in government and politics and science and industry who were making an effort because the whole issue of internment, they reckoned, was ridiculous. All these people, after all, were escaping from Nazi. They weren't going to be quislings and let the country down. They were doing all they can to squash Hitler. But it was very difficult for the authorities to determine that. That was discussed, and I was in on some of those discussions. I vaguely remember them. But what I didn't really understand is how difficult it was for my mother.
It obviously was quite a concern about the possibility of either being deported to Canada, Australia was another destination, or the Dominican Republic. And of course the worry was, what would my mother and I do if my father was deported to one of these far distant places, which of course at that time were only reachable by sea, and that was a very dangerous thing to undertake, a sea voyage at that time, because of the risk of the boat being torpedoed. There was an incident, again, which I only came to know about long afterwards, when a boat taking internees from the Isle of Man to Canada was in fact torpedoed, and the entire group of internees perished on the way. The prospect of that was very worrying.
My dearest, we are living in some late Victorian houses on the beach outside the village, each with 10 men. We are doing everything ourselves. My room overlooks the lovely bay. I am together with my friend and 3 Austrians. We are allowed to walk in an adjoining football pitch at certain hours. There is an incredible mixture of people, most of whom had little to lose through internment, but a large number of them have lost businesses and jobs. I have met some old friends. The time is still spent with nothing. My nerves are still not yet in order. Whatever you do, I can still not give you any advice. You should have a suitcase ready for deportation. I'm not anticipating anything for us in the mean future. Almost no time is left for preparation of minor details. Release seems to be impossible unless my job are doing something themselves. Worried about father. Send much nourishing food. Are some C-graded aliens free? Do not send times. We get it here. You probably have bigger problems than us here. Inform me about all financial arrangements with lawyer. Love, Conrad. From what you know now, how do you think your father's experience was overall of the whole internment camps?
Oh, I think one that helped to wreck life. It may be that one had a good intellectual time, but it wasn't a nice experience. And there was the awful business of trying to get a job on coming out, what you do. Your factory is no more, you're out of work. So he got very depressed when he came out. What happens next? When my father came out of internment in 1941 into another house, not Delgany, we were then in Woodlands, further down in the village, a large messy garden. He didn't know what to do. He'd never been a gardener. His father, my grandfather, was. But he thought he'd just start clearing up and gardening. And the long and short of it is that after a few years, he and I both became very keen gardeners. He was chairman and I became secretary of the Jordan's Village Garden Club. And there we ran the garden show and we did lots of things like that together. And I planted peonies all over the garden to make a great vista. And when I married your grandmother, I gave her, as a birthday present, I sent by post some of these peonies. These peonies here are the leftovers of those. Wherever we went, from after we married, first in Oxford and then in Edinburgh, and then here at Ormiston, we took little bits of roots from these peonies and re-established them. So these are direct descendants by cuttings of the peonies I planted in 1953 in Long Reading. And in a way, they are the result of my father taking, for the first time in his life, a proper interest in gardening. And I think they're still there in Long Reading. Now I've hybridized the white and the pink here, and we've got them in another part of this garden, flowering as well. So that is directly connected to the internment.
I don't think that the internment experience affected my father in the long term. He was, after all, only experiencing what all other immigrants, male immigrants to Britain, were experiencing. It wasn't as if he was being singled out in any way at all. My mother recalled often how he had written letters, many letters from his internment on the Isle of Man, making out that he was so desperately unhappy and so badly wanting to come home, which was a very understandable thing to experience. But when he finally did come home, after about 8 or 9 months on the Isle of Man, my mother recalls how he said, "I had the most wonderful time on the Isle of Man. There were so many other interesting people and enterprising people that I met there. It was altogether a very positive experience." So my mother thought, why had she been so worried about him all the time?
Where were you when this letter was sent to you?
I was in Devon. I was evacuated with a group of children from a small school that I had been sent to before the war. Moora Camp, Isle of Man, 17th of October, 1940. My dear Francisca, thank you very much for your lovely birthday card. I like it very much, and I pinned it with a nail on the wall. I'm very glad to hear from Mummy that you are well and such a good girl. It must be very nice to live on a farm and to see every day all the animals there. I have just read a Rupert book, and I think you are right that these books are now your favourite ones. They are perhaps even nicer than Baba's travels, although I am still very fond of Arthur and Zephyr. When you come home, we will have each of us a little dog. You a Scottie, Mummy a Steffilein, and I an Irish setter. That will be fun. When you go to church next Sunday, you must pray that this wicked Hitler gets a good smacking. Because of him, so many good little girls cannot see their daddies and mummies. With love and many kisses, your daddy.